Our top stories for tonight. The Prime Minister tells JTV's 60 Minutes that despite the numerous challenges, the national economy remains robust and reiterates his government's measures to cut public spending. The United Nations cautions that the biggest food emergency in the world is happening in Yemen, and famine is now a possible scenario for 2017 if no immediate action is taken. And Donald Trump says he hopes for fantastic relations with Russia at a joint news conference with the British Prime Minister, who is in favor of keeping sanctions against Moscow in place. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki sought to ease public fears about the economy, saying the economic crisis that Jordan witnessed in 1989 was far more serious than the current economic challenges we are confronting. He said there's no reason for a major concern with regards to the economy. Speaking on JTV's 60 Minutes, Mulki said that despite a worldwide economic crunch, and even though Jordan has become the safe haven for waves of Syrian refugees with interrupted trade due to border closures, the national economy remains robust. On government measures to cut public spending, Mulki said the cabinet is serious about pursuing tax evasion as well as fighting nepotism and corruption. He also said the government will halt the execution of projects that waste public money without bringing dividends. This year's general budget, he said, aims to curb debt to GDP and to boost the economy rather than collect taxes as a source of revenue. The United Nations World Food Programme, WFP, said it has cut by half the food rations distributed to over 1 million Iraqis displaced in the war against Daesh because of delays in payments of funds from donor states. The 50% cuts effective this month are expected to affect over 1.4 million people across Iraq, and its impact is already being felt in camps east of Mosul. About 160,000 people have been displaced since the military campaign to recapture Mosul from Daesh was launched in October.
This year somehow we are receiving commitments from donors a little bit late, and we are talking with donors, but we haven't got enough money as of yet. You need a signature before the money's in the bank. You haven't got it. So we are talking to donors, and the major ones would be the US, Germany, Japan. There's a whole range of donors that do give us money.
As Iraqi forces rout Daesh from eastern Mosul, they are learning more about the workings of the terrorist group, which left behind a formidable paper trail. More than 2 years after Daesh took over Mosul, Iraqi forces have retaken the eastern half of the city and now prepare for the second part of the offensive to retake the western half. Colonel Amir al-Fatlawi, head of the intelligence for the 16th Division of the Iraqi Army, gives an example of the workings of the terrorist group. He says they have planted people as part of a sleeper cell. He fears that one 17-year-old boy is one of them. Although he says the boy appears harmless, the colonel suspects he would remain a threat after Daesh has been pushed out of Mosul. The boy was one of a group of some 150 men who gathered at a local mosque around 1 year ago and were taken to a training camp in the area. The daily routine involved waking at dawn for prayer, followed by breakfast, physical exercise, lessons in Islamic doctrine, or Daesh version of Islam, and how to use a rifle. After 3 weeks, the recruits were allowed to go back home on a break and were told to come back. But the boy says he was scared to go back, so he did not.
They said that this is Islam, that the Iraqi forces will come and rape our women, that they will torture my mother and father. They said, come to us, that there is no better path than our path, that it will lead to heaven. I was 14 years old. They were looking for people my age. I was 14 years old.
Colonel Fatlawi says he has reason to remain skeptical, as many claim they quit. On his desk, a stack of documents recovered from Daesh bases in northern Mosul include papers detailing the group's weapon inventory and other insights into their workings. And another food emergency, perhaps the largest in the world, in Yemen. The UN Emergency Relief Coordinator Stephen O'Brien is cautioning the Security Council that famine is now a possible scenario for 2017 if no immediate action is taken in Yemen. The country has roughly 3 months' supply of wheat left to draw from due to the central bank crisis, which has cut food imports and deepened starvation. A decision by Yemen's government in August to move the central bank out of the capital Sana'a to the southern port city of Aden has triggered bigger hardships for Yemenis and paralyzed the bank. Over to Syria, the United Nations says there's no confirmation that the UN-backed Syria talks scheduled on February 8th in Geneva have been postponed. Spokeswoman for the UN Special Envoy for Syria, Yara Sharif, denied the talks have been postponed after a statement by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov earlier in the day, saying the talks will be held in late February. Lavrov had made the remarks in Moscow after a meeting with activists of the Syrian opposition. The UN spokeswoman did not say who was invited to the talks, but noted that invitations were being prepared. A UN Syria envoy, Stefan de Mistura, is to travel to New York next week to meet with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres over Syria. Peace talks on Syria ended in Kazakhstan on Tuesday with Iran, Russia and Turkey announcing a trilateral mechanism to observe and ensure full compliance with a truce agreed between Syrian warring parties. U.S. President Donald Trump says he wants to have good relations with Russia. At a joint news conference with British Prime Minister Theresa May in Washington, the first foreign leader to visit the White House since Trump's inauguration a week ago. In his own words, he said he hoped to have fantastic relations with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but that it was possible that would not occur. Trump did not state whether he was ready to lift sanctions on Moscow, while May told the news conference she believed sanctions against Russia should stay in place until Moscow fulfilled its obligations under the Minsk agreement. She also made a point of emphasizing that during their talks, Trump had given strong backing to NATO, an alliance that he has previously called obsolete. May stated that Britain's Queen Elizabeth has invited Trump for a state visit later this year, and he has accepted. A statement by the Kremlin said Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. President Donald Trump will speak by telephone tomorrow. The Kremlin sees the move as a first step towards what Trump has billed as a normalization of relations after 3 years of tension sparked by the conflict in Ukraine. Here's more in this Reuters report.
It could be the most important phone call of the year. The Kremlin has announced new U.S. President Donald Trump will speak with Russia's President Vladimir Putin on Saturday, a first step toward Trump's promised warming of ties between the two countries. For years, the backers of opposing forces in the conflicts of Ukraine and Syria. Trump is also expected to call Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel that day. That call also focusing on Russia, according to a source in Berlin. President Trump has said he's open to a deal with Moscow to lift sanctions imposed during the Obama administration, a move likely to be opposed by some members of his own Republican Party and foreign allies, including Merkel, especially after those reports by U.S. intelligence services that Russia sought to influence the election in his favor, partly, they say, through cyber espionage against opponent Hillary Clinton, an allegation Trump's denied. His nomination of Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State has also drawn criticism, the former Exxon boss having close ties to Russia's establishment. News of the upcoming phone call also comes amid reports the White House is considering significant cuts to its United Nations contributions, with Western diplomats now concerned Russia will step in to fill the leadership gap. Putin and Trump last spoke in November when the Russian leader called Trump to congratulate him on his election victory.
And on the Mexican front, the U.S. president and his Mexican counterpart, Enrique Peña Nieto, agreed to resolve their differences on a disputed building of a wall on the U.S.-Mexican border. This came during a phone conversation between the two, with Trump saying they had a comprehensive discussion of all aspects of bilateral relations. The wall issue had threatened to trigger a diplomatic spat between the two countries over the repeated U.S. demand that Mexico pay for the wall to halt illegal immigration to the U.S. The White House had suggested that the United States could impose a 20% tax on goods from Mexico to pay for the wall. And although the White House said its tax proposal is in the early stages, it still sent the peso tumbling. Mexican Foreign Minister Luis Videgaray said ultimately the proposed taxation would hurt the American consumer. The Mexican president was due in Washington, but had cancelled his trip over those comments. New U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, pledged to overhaul the world body. She made the remarks to the press as she arrived to present her credentials to the UN chief Antonio Guterres. The daughter of immigrants from India, Haley left her post as South Carolina governor, which she had held since 2011, to become a UN ambassador. During her confirmation hearing, Haley seconded criticism of the organization by U.S. President Donald Trump and many other Republicans. In her remarks to the Senate, Haley promised to press for UN reforms, but also fight for human rights and support international institutions.
This is a time of action. This is a time of getting things done. And this administration is prepared and ready to go in, to have me go in, look at the UN, and everything that's working, we're going to make it better. Everything that's not working, we're going to try and fix. And anything that seems to be obsolete and not necessary, we're going to do away with.
Chilean residents confronted their president and other authorities over what they said is a delayed response to the worst wildfires in the country's modern history. At least 7 people have died. The wildfires ravaged wide swaths of the central south regions. International help from France, the United States, Peru and Mexico has been pouring into Chile as the fires swept through forested hills and into neighboring towns, scorching homes, industry and the region's world-renowned vineyards. The country has declared a state of emergency. Chile's CONAF Forestry Service said 35 of the fires were still out of control. At least some of the fires may have been started intentionally, and there have been a number of arrests as investigations continue. In the world of fashion, Chinese fashion designer Guo Pei brought her latest creation to the Paris Haute Couture Week Spring-Summer 2017. Under the theme Legend, the fashion show culminated in the appearance of legendary 85-year-old American supermodel Carmen Delorme. Guo used complicated embroidery with traditional Chinese craftsmanship to render the Gothic architecture in her gowns, expressing a Chinese designer's imagination about classic Western civilization. Guo is the first Asian fashion designer to be invited by the Paris Haute Couture Week. In the last decade or so, Jordan has witnessed a new trend in the world of fitness and well-being. One particular sport has seen an explosive growth worldwide since it was founded in the United States in 2000. And Amman is no stranger to this fitness craze, CrossFit, becoming an affiliate in 2012 with the opening of the first gym, dubbed Box. In the next weeks, I will be filing a series of reports on the Jordanian fitness scene. In tonight's report, we find out what is so special about CrossFit. It's never boring and it's always challenging. It's you against yourself. That's CrossFit. It's also better known as constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity. CrossFit also prides itself for not specializing. It includes aspects of gymnastics, weightlifting, running, rowing, and more. But what does that mean? Plainly, these are the core movements of life.
CrossFit is learning movements and being able to move in a better position to live a healthier life for the future without needing knee replacements or hip surgery or anything like that.
With a sport growing so fast, its reputation followed it, but not on that same flowery path. Some attribute its bad reputation to incorrect coaching and progression. It's always best to check qualifications and experience of CrossFit coaches before deciding to train with any particular coach. However, every person remains solely responsible for their own self-body awareness, be it in CrossFit or any other sport. For CrossFit, good or bad reputation didn't affect its mark in the fitness world.
Learning how to move properly from squats and deadlifts and so on to using movements from gymnastics and powerlifting and Olympic lifting, plyometrics, calisthenics that we were never aware of before, that now everybody knows exactly what they are and how to do them properly. So it's added so much more knowledge that we didn't have, an emphasis on proper knowledge that we didn't have before or have access to.
But CrossFit is not just that. For Farah, who started as a CrossFitter and turned into a coach, it's much more than that.
CrossFit to me is a lifestyle. It's not just coming into a gym and doing a workout. It's making healthy lifestyle choices. So that's sleeping for 8 hours at night, eating the right foods during the day, being active. That's CrossFit to me. And it's being around like-minded people.
The fitness regimen is quite known for its tight-knit community, who work out together whether inside the box or who take it outside the walls of the place they train in. For Tamer, who only a few months ago became a CrossFitter, the sport changed his life. He said he hadn't done any sports before and believed he couldn't do it.
I thought I would never be able to be this active, but just today I threw a ball that's 14 pounds 100 times to the ceiling. I never thought I could do that. It really changed how I view myself, my body, and it's really mind over matter.
Whether CrossFit appeals to you or not is a matter of taste. But taking care of your health is your responsibility. Choosing the sport of your liking is the key to maintaining that thread of physical activity and exercise in your life. Your health is your wealth. And remember, it's never too late. Rafa Nadal had to be at his battling best to outlast Grigor Dimitrov 6-3, 5-7, 7-6, 6-7, 6-4 at the Australian Open and set up a mouth-watering 9th Grand Slam final meeting with his great rival Roger Federer. The 30-year-old Spaniard looked every inch a 14 times Grand Slam champion as he slugged it out with his 25-year-old opponent over nearly 5 hours on Rod Laver Arena, to reach his first major final since the 2014 French Open and 21st overall. With 35-year-old Serena Williams facing her 36-year-old sister Venus in tomorrow's women's final and a rusted 35-year-old Federer waiting for Nadal on Sunday, it is the first time in the Open era that all 4 finalists at a Grand Slam have been over 30. Basketball players in North Korea have been learning gymnastics as a warm-up exercise to improve their performances. They have been practicing rhythmic exercise using a basketball. They do dribbles, changeovers, offensive and defensive actions which local coaches approve of. One player said this gymnastics developed his suppleness. The rhythmic exercise has been created by the Korean Mass Gymnastic Production Company, which has also created similar exercises for soccer players. And finally, the weather forecast. The kingdom remains under the effect of the cold front for the rest of tonight, with a further drop in temperatures expected tomorrow. Temperatures drop to a low of 1 degree Celsius tonight, with continued rainfall in most regions and snowfall over highlands 1,000 meters above sea level. Winds will be northwesterly brisk to gusty, with the snowstorm extending gradually to regions 800 to 900 meters above sea level. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect relatively cold conditions tomorrow, with a chance for drizzles, while winds will be northerly moderate to brisk and seas slightly choppy. Here are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Before we conclude, here's a quick recap of our top stories. The Prime Minister tells JTV's 60 Minutes that despite the numerous challenges, the national economy remains robust and reiterates his government's measures to cut public spending. The United Nations cautions that the biggest food emergency in the world is happening in Yemen, and famine is now a possible scenario for 2017 if no immediate action is taken. And Donald Trump says he hopes for fantastic relations with Russia at a joint news conference with the British Prime Minister, who is in favor of keeping sanctions against Moscow in place. We've come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Dana Abu Sham. Thanks for watching. Stay in, be safe, and have a good night.